true King. I've been saved, I've been changed, I have been set free. And amazing grace is the song I sing. Hello, my name is child of the one true King. Yeah. Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Hello, Crossing Church. How are you doing? Are you doing okay? It's good to see you. Excited to see you. I'm excited about this message. I want to welcome all of us that are joining together from Macomb, Kirksville, 929, Pittsfield, Hannibal, Lima, Mount Sterling, and Keokuk. We are so glad that you're joining us. If you're joining us online, we are really thankful that you are joining us online as well, and that we have an opportunity to connect with you, and hope you're blessed by the message and the time that we spend together. We're in a series called Healed, and for the last 4 weeks, I have been Debbie Downer, right? I mean, it's been heavy stuff. It's been hard things to hear about denial and about addiction and about sexual dysfunction and all of these abuse, difficult things to hear. And so here I am. I'm getting ready for this one. I'm thinking divorce. Ugh. Here we go again. Let's go down into the stuff again, deal with the junk again. And, God provided something that is just really, really awesome. And I'm excited to share that with you. The state of this issue and every issue that we're talking about in this series would be this. And I know this sounds painfully obvious, but the best way to be healed is to never get injured in the first place. You've probably all heard an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that would be great. And we need to talk about what happens in our marriage relationships that can lead us into divorce. Maybe you're here listening, watching, and you're in a marriage that's struggling right now. We're going to talk about that. Maybe you are in the process or just coming out of a divorce or a divorced person, and you're dealing with the realities of that. And we're going to talk about that as well. But before that, I really want to spend some time talking about misconceptions and how those misconceptions apply to both marriage and divorce. Because what it actually does, what we actually believe right now, what you believe in this moment that I'm hoping to change, those misconceptions make you and me more susceptible to the injury of divorce. How many of you heard this? And I really need shows of hands if you've heard this, okay? So all of our locations, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you heard this, that if you marry, you have a 50-50 chance of ended up being divorced? That is a common belief. You have a 50-50 chance. Half of all marriages end in divorce. How many of you heard this, that Christians have the same likelihood of divorce as anyone? That there's no difference between Christians and non-Christians. That's what I thought. How many of you heard this, that second marriages actually double the incidence of divorce? How many of you heard that? Yeah. You know what? I've heard that myself. Not only have I heard it, I've researched it and found evidence on it. I've believed it, and I've preached on it. And some of you may have heard me say that. So what I have to do before I do anything else is say, sorry, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. And I have never in my life been so happy to be wrong. I am praising God that I'm wrong. And it's exciting. I guess we're all just kind of gullible people. If somebody says something long enough and as many times, eventually it kind of sticks. Eventually we all start going, well, that must be it. But those statements are not only untrue, they rob us of what's really the most important thing that we need to have as we're contemplating marriage. And you know what that is? Hope. When we get married, don't you have hope? Is there anybody that walks down the aisle or is waiting at the front of the aisle for his beautiful bride and they're going, you know what? It's kind of like this. Here we go. Hope this works. I mean, really, I think that everybody that goes through a marriage process believes that they're the exception, that that's not going to happen to them, that they're going to live the fairy tale. And the fairy tale always ends with the same words, and they lived happily ever after. And you expect that that's what's going to happen, right? Well, you need to have that hope. You don't need to be robbed of that hope. A few months ago, I got this book. And I get lots of books. People send me books. They want me to read them. And I've done endorsements before on books. And I got this little book. And it was about marriage. It's called The Good News About Marriage. And I said, Allison, hey, you might want to read this book. I said, actual truth. And I didn't look at it at all. I just gave it to her and tell me if this is any good. And she did what I usually do. And then she took the book and she threw it in her desk and forgot about it. And I'm getting ready for this sermon. And I said, hey, did you ever read that book I gave you a couple months ago? And she goes, what book? And I go, that book on marriage. And she goes, no, it's in my desk. And so I pulled it out and I started to really look at it. The foreword is by Andy Stanley. And it's endorsed by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, the guy who we take everyone that we do marriage counseling with. We take them through his stuff. And it's endorsed by about every major evangelical pastor that's out there. And I started to read it. She's a researcher, Harvard researcher. She sold over 2 million books. And she did all this research. And I want to share this with you because what she says is true. And if you have a problem believing that it's true, this is on a new part of what we call our marriage family toolbox. It's on our website. If you get on our website, and it'll say links, you go down on the links and it'll say the toolbox or the family toolbox. And we have all sorts of things that you can look at, download, like to protect your family with internet filters, media filters, all sorts of the VidAngel thing with the paintball gun that I showed you before, and how you can filter your movies and television shows. And this book is on there. So I would encourage you to take it and read it because I want to share some of the news from this book that is just so hopeful and so positive as it applies to marriage. So much of what we say with regards to statistics in marriage just really aren't verified. And here's what she found. That 72% of first marriages, those people are still married. 72% of people in their first marriages are still married to each other, and that does not include that 28%. The other 28% aren't necessarily divorced, but widowed. 72%. So that, you know what? That's almost 3/4 of us that are in first marriages. We have a 75% chance of succeeding. That's pretty good. And that's all the way across the board. I was excited to hear that. Do you know why? There's a common belief that 50% of marriages end in divorce because in any given year, there are X number of marriages that are that people register with the Board of Health, and there are X number of divorces. And there are almost always about half as many divorces as marriages. So the idea is, well, half of marriages end in divorce. Well, that's not true because it's not taking into account all the marriages that didn't end in divorce. People that didn't get married that year but maybe got married a year ago or 50 years ago. And so it's just bad math, really bad math. That's where that misconception came from. As a matter of fact, she tells us that the divorce rate since 1981 is actually in decline. The divorce rate has gone down 32% since 1981. I thought that was pretty good. There are practices that are changing in marriage. People are getting married a little older. People that tend to have higher educations have a smaller incidence of divorce. People in their first marriages have a less of an incidence of divorce. And people that have been married, how many of you heard of the 7-year itch? People that last 5 years in a marriage, the incidence of divorce just plummets. Everything I'm reading, I'm going, this is great. This is hopeful. You know what it's teaching me? Is that what God created is a lot stronger than we want to give it credit for. That God created something that is not only wonderful, it's resilient. It hangs in there. Have you ever, and of course you all agreed with me, you've heard that people that are Christians don't have the same incidence of divorce as non-Christians. That came from a Barna study in 2001. In 2000, and I mean the secular news just got all over it. Christians get divorced as often as non-Christians. Well, this gal, Shaunti Feldhahn, who wrote this book, actually does research with George Barna. And this is what she found out because she didn't understand that. She started to research and found out that what Barna asked was this: how many of you are professing Christians? Do you know how many people in the United States profess to be Christian? Over 90%. Over 90% profess to be Christian. She said, well, maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe it's not about professing Christians. Maybe it's about practicing Christians. And so she did it on the basis of those who go to church regularly. And so got with George Barna and in association with George Barna did a 2008 study, statistical study, and found out that people who attend church regularly have a 27% less likelihood of being divorced because they went to church. And there were two other groups that did studies and had an incidence of up to 50%. Like you're 50% less likely to go through a divorce if you attend church regularly. And I went, all right, yay for that. That's incredible. I like that. And for those of you that are in second marriages or third marriages, and this idea that it doubles the rate each time you remarry, guess what? Urban legend. There is no statistical evidence to support that anywhere. What she found is that remarriage only slightly increases the divorce rate. Only slightly. Listen to this. Everyone that she did a survey, and everyone that she surveyed, 80% of the people surveyed said that they were happy in their marriage. 80%. 30 of those 80%, 30% said they were extremely happy in their marriages. And 93% of those who were married said they would marry the same person all over again. And I'm thinking to myself, Lord, you know what you're doing. When you create something, even though we abuse it and tear it apart and do so many things that can hurt, you know what? You keep us strong. Now, I didn't say that to discourage those of you that have been divorced. I don't share it to make you, if you're divorced or if you're struggling in your marriage right now, I don't say those things to make you feel bad like you're the exception to the rule. I share it with you to give us all hope. And that's what we need to have when it comes to marriage, don't we? We need to have hope. We need to be able to approach our marriages and say, we can do this. We can work this out. We can make this happen. And what we want to do is apply those things that's going to make our marriage stronger. If our marriages, and we feel like they're just fine, what can we do to make them stronger? And if our marriages are struggling, what things need to be changed or reversed? Where do we need to look in our marriages to make a difference? That's what hope brings us. So, all that in mind, with all of that in mind, let's say that maybe you right now are struggling in your marriage. You're having difficulty in your marriage. What do you do if you're in that situation right now? Jerry, can you tell me something that you can do in my marriage? What can I do to make that marriage better? Number one, pay attention to the little things. Pay attention to the little things. Big things don't mess up marriages. Now, I know that and I've heard the stories a lot of times about affairs and about all of that stuff, right? But you know what? That didn't happen just like that. It was a mountain of little things. And over that time, it creates degrees of separation. When those little things are not attended to, it starts creating distance between the two of you, and that opens your heart and your mind up to things that it should never be opened up to. And the big things don't come that way. The big things come after all the little things. Most of our problems in our marriages come from accumulation. They come from the accumulation of things. And do you know what? When we don't deal with the little things, we got to go back to sermon number 1. Because we're living where? We're living in denial. There was a statistic in this book that really impressed me. It was this: communication is key. 82% of the people surveyed that were having problems in their marriages. Listen to this. This is going to freak you out. 82%, that's almost that's all but 18%. 82% of the people having problems in their marriages, one person in the marriage relationship was unaware that there was a problem. They just didn't know that. Why didn't somebody tell me? I didn't know. If somebody would have just explained it to me, I could have made the adjustments. Do you realize that the reason that there are mountains of little things that build up in our marriages is because we're not talking to each other? I remember when I went to a big Promise Keepers event back in the early 90s, and they were really pushing us on communication with our spouses and what it means to love your spouse and to communicate with your spouse. And they asked the guys, how many of you would say that your marriage is somewhere between a 7 and a 10? And all the hands went up. Everybody's like, yeah, man, I'm 7 and a 10. How many of you know that your wife would say that? And the hands got a little more sheepish, It was kind of like, like some of you when you're like praising God, It's like, I don't know if I want to do this or not. You know what I did that day? When I came back from Promise Keepers, I walked, my wife, I remember exactly where she was. I walked upstairs. I came back. I gave her a hug and a kiss and was glad to be home. And I got to ask you a question. I got to ask you a question right now. She goes, what? What's going on? I go, on a scale of 1 to 10, how am I doing as a husband? And you know what? I thought I knew the answer. What are you laughing at? I thought I knew the answer, but I didn't know the answer. And then I had to say, okay, where do I need to improve? What do I need to be working on? All right, this is a gut check. This is like, tense up because here it comes. How many of you men would be willing to ask your spouse that question and adjust? And you know what? Before you wives get the big smile on your face, that needs to go both ways. That needs to go both ways. All I'm saying and trying to illustrate here is communication is key. You have to speak to each other and you have to talk and you have to create those environments and those opportunities to be able to say those things. And this is another reason why small groups is so important. Guys, we have a nature. Men have a nature. It's to provide and to protect. And in order to provide and to protect, and that's just natural for men, in order to do that, they have to be in control of the situation. Right? How can you provide for someone unless you're in control of the situation? How can you protect someone unless you're in control of the situation? Right? That's why guys don't like girls driving cars. Have you ever seen that? I mean, I know that doesn't apply 100%, but it does about 94%. And I'm not a statistician or a researcher, but I just see that. Every time people leave, it's rare that the guy gets in the passenger. You know why? Because that wheel represents control. And if he's in control of the vehicle, he can provide and he can protect. And if he's not, then he can't. And guys that sit in the passenger seat, they don't shut up when they're in the passenger seat, right? All they do, ladies, is critique your driving. And the truth is, statistically, women are better drivers than men. But men will never agree to that, right? And it's because it's part of our nature to provide and protect. We need to be in control of the situation. Why do I tell you that? Because we don't like taking counseling. We don't like anybody telling us what to do, because it shows that we're weak, that we didn't figure it out on our own. And if we're weak, then we're not strong enough and in control enough to be able to provide and protect. That's why you got to drag men into church. That's why you got to drag men into counseling, because that's just their nature. It's our nature. But if you're in a small group, listen to this. If you're in a small group and somebody else is getting transparent in that small group and talking about something that's going on in their life, I guarantee you the guy's hearing it. And without you, wives, ever saying anything, he'll figure that out. He'll make that his answer, and he'll start applying it. Because that's where sometimes blind spots are revealed. It's important. It's important to hear these things. Communication is key. Number 3, survive and thrive. Survive and thrive. I just told you a little while ago that statistics prove that if you last 5 years in a marriage, the incidence of divorce is just plummets. Hang in there. Don't give up. I know sometimes, was it Irma Bombeck that says the grass is always greener over the septic tank? Okay? Are you hearing me? Because sometimes you think, hey, maybe it's time, hey, maybe not. Survive and thrive. Marriages get more stable the longer they last. See if you can pass that 5-year test. Now, I know there are a lot of rationalizations for divorce. And some of those rationalizations are valid. I know that there's a breach of trust. I know that there's unfaithfulness. I know there's abuse. I know that there's sexual dysfunction and an unwillingness to get help or counseling. But can you say, I have exhausted all options? In the first part of this series, there were 2 videos, right? We've shown 2 videos, 2 gals, one from the Hannibal campus, one from the 929 campus, talking about the difficulties that they've had in their life situation. Do you know what was common in those 2 stories? You know the tipping point was in those 2 stories? Their parents got divorced. If you were listening, that was the thing that lit the fuse for all these other things. And it's important that we understand that we exhaust all options. You're probably saying, well, Jerry, you've preached a whole sermon. You haven't even brought in God's word. It's like some sort of self-help thing. Well, just hang on. Don't give up. If you're divorced, don't give up on the idea of marriage. If there's anything you should have learned by this point, just listening, is that there's a lot to be hopeful for. And there's a lot of wins if you can hang in there and you can figure out how to make it work. I want us to look at John chapter 4, verses 15 to 18. I love this story. It's such an incredible story. And it's the story of the woman at the well. She was a Samaritan woman. And Jesus went through Samaria, which was not normally done. It's interesting that it says in John 4 that he had to go through Samaria because there was a sense of urgency about it. He didn't have to go through Samaria. He could have taken a different road to the north, but he had to go. Because I think he had a divine appointment at a well in Sychar. And he sat down by this well, and here comes this woman. You know the story. She came to draw water. She came in the middle of the afternoon. All the women would come early in the morning, but here she comes in the middle of the afternoon. There's all sorts of a narrative that you can derive from that about what was going on in her life. And she was a woman of bad reputation. She was also a Samaritan. A woman, a Samaritan, and a person of bad reputation in her own community. So there's at least 3 reasons why Jesus shouldn't have had anything to do with her, but he was just the opposite of that, just the opposite. And they started a conversation. And as that conversation got more revealing, we get to these words in verse 15. It says, the woman said to him, "Sir, Because Jesus talked about living water. I can give you living water. You never have to come to this well again. And she said, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. And he told her, go call your husband and come back. Verse 17, I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands. And the man that you have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. He just lays it out. This woman's been married 5 times, and the man that she's living with. She's not in a marital relationship with. Now, there's a lot of ramifications of this scripture, a lot, that are very powerful. What Jesus is doing here, and I've heard people say, well, you know, have you ever heard the term living in adultery? Have you ever heard that term? Like God only recognizes one marriage and he doesn't recognize any marriages after that, and you're living in adultery. It's like this habitual sin. As long as you still stay married to this second spouse, then, well, did Jesus recognize that this woman had only been married 1 time, or what did he say? What did he say? He said, you've been married how many times? So in fact, did he recognize all 5? And he recognized that the relationship she was in now was not a legitimate relationship, and he called her out on it, right? That's true, isn't it? But that didn't stop him from pushing that grace on her, right? And allowing her to see that he cared about her and there was healing before her. Don't give up on the idea of marriage. Number 2, fail forward. Fail forward. I don't know how many of us fail backward. You know what I mean? We just blow up. Something bad happens. Like let's say you're here and this is the first week and you just got your divorce papers, or you just finalized it and you just dissolved all of your family assets, and you're dealing with all kinds of awful things. And I know that some of you might be dealing with that. Like it's a horrible time. So what's happened? Your marriage has failed, right? Well, what now? What do? Fail forward. While you're down on the ground, pick up some trash. Clean up. Do something. You know what I mean? Do something to improve yourself. It is amazing what happens. You know what? A lot of us, what happens, we get stuck when we have a failure like this in our lives, a defining failure. We have that failure, and all we can do is look in the rearview mirror. You just can't stop looking in the rearview mirror. And God wants you to say, yeah, recognize that that's the truth. Allow me to heal you through that. Allow me to minister to you through that. But you know what? Look out the windshield. Because that's the life that's in front of you. The Bible says if anyone is in Jesus Christ, he's what? He's a new creation. The old is what? The old is gone. The new has come. You need to look forward. I love this story and what happens. Because what she does is she recognizes that her life is a failure, but she fails forward. And look how she fails forward. In verses at 28 and 29, it says, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ? She owned her past, but she made it a chapter in the unfolding grace of God in her life. Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Oh yeah, that's who I was, but I'm changing because he's changing me. Yeah, it's part of my story and I can't change it from being part of my story, but it no longer defines me. Now I'm being defined by something completely new because I have my eyes fixed on Jesus. You might feel like you're a failure right now. You might feel like it's over right now. But if you'll just get your head looking out the windshield and start trusting the Lord and giving your heart and your life to the Lord, he can do great things. He can heal you and make you new. He has the ability to do that. So don't give up on the idea of marriage. Fail forward. Number 3, stay connected. Stay connected. You know, there's a tendency when we are hurt deeply like this to isolate ourselves, isn't it? Nobody understands what I'm dealing with. And we already heard that that's what Satan wants. He wants to get us isolated. Don't let Satan isolate you. In the middle of an experience like that, more than ever, you need to have people around you. And I know that when we're going through a divorce, you feel like I'm the fifth wheel. I'm the one without the person. Everybody else is a couple, and they're talking about their this, and they're talking about their, and it's not comfortable. Tough it out. Tough it out. Stay connected, because that's when you need people more than ever, and you need to experience the love of Christ through those relationships more than ever. You stay in the light when you stay connected. Resist that temptation to isolate yourself. Stay in your small group. Develop key relationships. And number 4, concentrate on being the right spouse, not on finding the right spouse. I hear this so often. I just can't find the right. I've been looking for the right. I just can't find. There's just nobody out there. There's just nobody. They just don't exist. You can't find them, and you can't. It's just all that, right? You're doing the wrong thing. You can't change all that out there. And if you try, you're going to end up in a worse position. Here's what you do. You change what's going on in here. You trust in the Lord and you let Him shape you and change you. You know what? I believe that the Lord has got a plan for every one of our lives, and it's a good plan. Not to hurt you, but to bless you. He has got an incredible plan. What we have to do is our best to be a reflection of Jesus Christ, and He will provide. Ask yourself, what can I do to be more like Him and to reflect Him? You know, one of the gals, Jill, the one that we watched on the video screen, she came to her pastor, Jim Dennis, and she said, you know, before I ever date again, I just need to take some time off. And then I want to be accountable to you and Karen. And if I ever do date again, I want to bring that guy to you, and you got to sign off on him. Isn't that awesome? That's what I'm talking about. Our marriages were designed to reflect our relationship with Jesus Christ. We live in a culture that wants to tell us that marriage is pointless and it doesn't even need to be defined anymore. But the Bible is right, and it's always been right. Amen. Marriage is God's invention where two people become one flesh, and they illustrate the relationship between Christ and the church, and the deepest things of God are revealed in that relationship. We need to have hope. We need to have hope. I wonder today if you'll stand a little taller, no matter what situation you're in, and go, you know what? God has a hold of me. He has a hold of me, and if I just trust in Him, He'll do great and marvelous things. We're moving to a time of decision.